Okay, everyone, welcome back to another Fit Drivers podcast. I'm really thrilled today to have this gentleman on. I think you're going to be very, very impressed with his delivery, but also his background. And actually, his background is too much to read, but we're going to put it at the end so you can post. But Joshua has worked as a fitness and performance and nutrition specialist for 17 years. Previously, Joshua served in the military as a health and wellness specialist for 9 years. Joshua holds a master's in exercise science and bachelor's in kinology, and also has been a certified sports nutritionist. Joshua, in his spare time, when he's not doing all this, he also is a 10-year competitive powerlifter in the state of Texas. So Joshua, welcome, my good friend.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you having me.
And before we go any further, I want to thank you so much for your service and your time. We very much appreciate that. Like I said, welcome, Joshua. And, first, when we get started here, take a little time to explain to our listeners really about your background and how you got started and what your passion was.
Yeah, so I guess where it started for me is I'll kind of go back to once I got done with undergrad and graduate school. You had said, I got my bachelor's in kinesiology, my master's in exercise science. After that, my first role, my intent was to be a college strength conditioning coach. That's what I really targeted. And that was my first role at Mizzou. I was an assistant strength conditioning coach at Mizzou. Did that for about 2.5 years and really enjoyed it. Kind of got everything out of that I could. Some of my mentors and leaders left. And so I looked to see what else was out there. And I took a chance and went on a left turn, heard about this afloat fitness specialist thing with the Navy that was for civilians. Took that, got the chance to go out to San Diego. And at this time, again, single, not married, no kids, nothing. And did that for 5 years as an afloat fitness specialist with the Navy. I was with 2 different ships, or commands, as they called it. During that time, and deployed with each ship. Really found an intense passion and love for working with the U.S. military, being part of something bigger than yourself and helping in some small way through fitness and health and nutrition and activity, making today's warfighters more resilient, helping them do their jobs better and come home in is just as good or better shape than when they left.
Right on.
After that, I took a right-hand turn. Said, San Diego's getting expensive. I want to try and see what else I can do. Wasn't finding a whole lot of military related roles. So I went into the corporate world and worked for the former Bayer, or Monsanto, which was becoming Bayer Crop Sciences at the time I got there, and got into corporate fitness. And I did that for about 1.5 years, only to have the calling for the military come back again when a friend of mine said, hey, there's a position in Italy with a paratrooper unit for a strength coach. Are you interested? Because he knew I liked special forces, loved Italy, and I still wanted to be a strength coach. I said, yes, absolutely. The powers that be and the stars aligned. I took the role over in Italy for 1 year. It was supposed to be a 3-year contract role. Unfortunately, with contracts, funding can get cut. It's rare. It did happen, so it ended up being 1 year. I don't regret a single minute being there. It was an awesome experience being in Italy, working with paratrooper units, really testing myself as a strength coach and a fitness professional. Came back to the States just literally a month before COVID hit. And so there was the story that is COVID for about 9 months, lockdown, not finding interviews, not finding, much for work because everything froze. After that, we came out of that, I found the role with Booz Allen. A friend of mine said, hey, have you ever heard of San Angelo? The Department of Defense Fire Academy is looking for a strength coach. Again, still single, no kids, not even a pet or a cat. I could go where I wanted to. And I did. I said, yeah, I definitely want to get back into that field. I'll head down to Texas. And so since October of 2020, I've been down here. I worked for the DoD Fire Academy for 3 years, transitioned out of that role after that contract finished, started doing some Army research and literature review on physical activity and the Army Combat Fitness Test for about 2 years after that, working remotely. That contract ended. And so I separated from Booz Allen. This was last July. And then in August of last year, I started my current role as the first telehealth exercise physiologist that a company called Vori Health opened for. And I've been doing that since. And now I work all general population, completely remote, working specifically on musculoskeletal health and exercise physiology with patients from around the US. So in a nutshell, that's kind of where I've been and what I've done. It's been a wild ride, but I've loved every minute of it.
Well, thank you so much for taking time to do that. The reason I wanted that is so that because, our Fit Drivers podcast for this last year and start this year, Joshua, is that, we understand the critical health issues that drivers face out there today. So I've been working hard to have people like yourself to come on that have degrees, and especially in these areas. And so when you and I connected and started talking, I thought, wow, you'd be a great guest to come on because you recognize the value in strength training and so forth. And of course, what we're trying to get accomplished is to help these drivers and these men and women out there find a way somehow, some form, to get some type of exercise in, as well as good nutritional habits out there, right, to help protect their livelihood, right, because their livelihood depends on passing their medical exam. So one of the first questions that I wanted to ask you, and I know this may seem like to most people when I ask this, they say, well, Bob, that's a pretty dumb question, but I always want to ask it because I want people to really understand. I'm assuming you believe also too that exercise is severely under recognized out there in the world today, right, as a form of medicine and helping people take care of themselves. You agree?
Absolutely. I do agree.
And tell us a little bit how you've seen that really transpire into when you're working with people in the military, rescue, all those kind of things, on how that plays a significant part post and pre.
Yeah, I'd say in any occupation where your physicality and your ability to be mobile and do things physically that's going to play a huge role versus somebody who may have, an office job or something that's more sedentary, where you don't depend on your physicality and your resiliency to get through the day, the week, and, year to year. But even for someone who is sedentary, but let's keep it more specific to the populations I have worked with, military, and even the occupation of truck driving. Just being able to do your job, you've got to have a certain minimum threshold of physical abilities and capacities, ranges of motion, flexibility, extensibility, strength, stability, even stamina to some regards. And I don't think anybody wants to have to go through each and every day or work day in pain either. So strength training as being one component of physical activity, I think is critical. In physical activity as a lifestyle habit of adoption is also critical, because they're showing now more and more where being sedentary, and by definition, somebody who routinely gets less than 4,000 steps is considered sedentary, and they're not getting minimum recommendations of exercise, of course. You are leaving so much opportunity and so much benefit on the table towards your health span and your lifespan, not to mention the day-to-day quality of life. It's one of the first things I look at, right up there with nutrition, with sleep, with hydration, stress. I'm asking my patients, and even some drivers I've worked with in the past, military members, what kind of physical activity do you get in? What type of strength training, aerobic activity? And then not even just at the gym, but how many steps do you get? What other leisurely activities do you do? It's one of the strongest correlates to their overall well-being as compared to being sedentary. So I would say it's as effective, if not more, than the way we look at medicine in pills and prescription. Yes.
Yes. And I know also too, I wanted to talk a little bit about that. You've had some previous experience with truck drivers, right? And recognize the type of challenges they have and so forth. Can you talk about that, please?
Yeah, and this is pretty interesting. I've got two stories that are quite similar, and it wasn't until we talked, just a week or two ago, that they came back up to light in the significance and the value of working with those two individuals plays, now looking almost 15 years later. I had two truck drivers, and this is when I was up in Wisconsin right after graduate school before I moved to Mizzou. I was doing a lot of personal training with individuals in between, graduating and finding my first full-time job. And I had one truck driver. These were regional truck drivers up in Southeast Wisconsin. Right. They drove all over the state. One was with Cisco, and one of them drove with, I got to think here, Cisco. The other one was with Cargill, so an ad company. The one with Cisco, and one gentleman was late 20s. He was just finishing up his first year as a truck driver. The other one had been doing it for about 10 years, and he was just over 40. Both of them married, no kids. So similar situations with a few variables different, but the Cisco driver was actually quite active within his truck driving role because he had to unload, put things
Right.
on dollies, put things on pallet jacks, put it into a bay or a warehouse where it would go. He was pretty active in his job. And we even had to look at movement mechanics that he did routinely and repetitively to make sure he didn't get overuse. There was, he was actually pretty active because of his truck driving. The opposite with my younger guy, he was just in his first year. He just sat in the cab, pulled it up to a bay, and they unloaded it. He'd shut the door down, on to the next stop. So he was in the cab sitting a lot, and he was starting to notice, former college athlete, pretty active guy. After a year in, like, I'm starting to gain weight. I'm starting to lose my energy. I'm fatigued. I'm tired. I don't have an opportunity to be active. Like, help me out. What can I do to compensate for a lot of the time I'm spending in the truck? Other than that, he was actually doing pretty good with his diet and things like that. We found some areas to work on, but it was the lifestyle of being a truck driver with no physical activity that was his problem. The other gentleman, after 10 years, it had worn him down quite a bit. He had gained some weight, and it wasn't until he went to his doctor and got some numbers and values saying, you've got to make some changes. You're 41 and it ain't looking good when you're going to be 51. And his diet wasn't that good. Sleep wasn't that good. There were some stress factors being away from family, but it was just two different scenarios with similar patients, clients, whatever we want to call it. And the tactics and strategies that we had to look at were similar but different to overcome both outside the truck driving occupation, but also literally the job itself when they were doing, their deliveries and things like that, being on the road hours on end, working long shifts. It didn't make it easy for them to have, wholesome meals ready to eat because they're not home that often. And it was interesting because I got an insight to their lives and the lifestyle that can come with being a regional truck driver. Sure. Now, after meeting you and talking, it's like there's a whole industry of professionals that drive truck and are probably falling victim to some of these issues, even more than what I saw. And there needs to be solutions out there. Now, we came to some really good outcomes with both these individuals. I worked with them for a year each. They actually overlapped for about 4 months. But the outcomes we had were promising. And it was just interesting to have to navigate what would work for them, given their unique situation as a truck driver.
Yeah, well, a couple things that you mentioned. I've got some, personal affiliation to the gentleman that worked for Cisco because one of my brothers who's been a driver, and he's got like 2 million safe miles, but he for, 20 years maybe or so, drove for Gordon Foods, which is same. And what you mentioned there, and being active, they are active, right? Because they're loading stuff, carts, pallet jacks up and down. But one of the things that they don't recognize about doing is helping these drivers understand the importance of, like you said, the mechanics of warming up before you jump in there and grab that pallet jack or slide that car, that two-wheel jack down the ramp, right? And it's snowy weather, and my poor brother, he is such a mess physically, his neck and back and so forth. And if there had been some type of education on how to get yourself ready and prepared for that, would certainly have made a difference, I know, in his overall.
Yes.
He can't turn his neck. I mean, he's really just hobbled bad. So I think that's, important. Even though they're active, but still it's even more important why you should have. And that's one of the things that I lobby for all the time is trying to, even like we know that as much as I believe in strength training, men and women and whatever age, it's got real true medicine, as I say, value to it to help you. And they can't get in and out of a gym all the time, but there's really a lot of good, I think strength and flexibility workout that can come from using bands, right? And
yes.
Bands, right? And people a lot of times think that, you're not going to get much out of that, but believe me, you can if you have the proper training.
One of my clients that I had at the time, we ended up getting him a TRX, a suspension trainer that he used in his truck, at stops, at home, and then body weight type stuff. And a set of bands ended up being pretty much all he needed. Whereas the other individual was fortunate enough that he went home each night, had his weekends off, and he could go to a gym or do some home stuff. But it was pretty phenomenal what we could get done with a suspension trainer, bands, and body weight for a year.
Yep. So tell me, Joshua, I'm always interested, people like yourself that what I call, maybe possibly work with. In your case, a little bit different because you've been with military, but some I say residential, the regular gym goer and so forth. And as I always tell the folks that one of the reasons why I moved out of that space so early on is I just got frustrated with the people that if they didn't look like everybody in the magazines in 30 days, they quit, right?
Mhm.
They don't want to do the work. And what I love about working with the drivers is for people like you and I that we understand that really the value comes from the inside out. And
Yes.
first, we're trying to work on all those issues on the inside to keep your heart ticking right and keep you going. And all of a sudden, if you do those things long enough, make changes in activity and nutrition and so forth, you look in the mirror and 6 months, you go, wow, I notice a physical looking difference.
Yep.
So tell us, now that you certainly know and have experience working with truck drivers, how does that compare to their health conditions compared to the regular consumer out there? Are they any different? Is it just the lifestyle? Or tell us, is there any difference between, getting them to point A and point B?
Yeah, in going back to what I saw with those two individuals compared to general population, it's a combination of either the extremes or a little bit of both. Being very sedentary from being in the cab far too often and not getting enough activity, so you see issues in health markers representative of a sedentary lifestyle, and like you would know, cholesterol, blood pressure, triglycerides, A1Cs, these types of things are not where they should be. And or the repetitive stress of musculoskeletal injuries from doing different tasks inefficiently, ineffectively over and over, that gives them, a bad shoulder, bad back, a neck, a knee, whatever it might be. I've seen, a combination of both. I've seen some of one or the other. What I find is, meeting them where they're at. What is it that what's their literal or figurative pain point, their struggle with their occupation, their job, their health, and prioritizing what's a priority for them. If I'm just trying to get them walking more, but they don't care about that, they want to fix their back, that's where I need to meet them at, is with their back issue. Or it's, I need to get off all these energy drinks, even though I think maybe it's the sleep. Well, if we get them off the energy drinks, their sleep will improve. So we've got to compromise with what they want and what I feel they need most. And when we can come to that agreement, like you just said, when they can start to feel it, well, I am sleeping better. I do have more energy. I don't have, stomach distress. I don't have the headaches. And then they start to even see it. I did drop 5 or 6 pounds. I am down 2 notches on my belt. Then they're like, whoa, this is working. I feel good, look good. What else can I do? And this upward spiral of positivity starts to spill out into other areas of their life. But I need to get that first domino to fall to get them to buy in.
Right. Another question I wanted to ask you is how much, I guess the word I want to say, importance that you put on people's resting heart rate?
As a baseline measure, when I'm looking at their, what is their resting heart rate, just to compare it to norms for, an age matched, gender matched, healthy individual, I will look at it. I usually don't do too much with it unless it's an athletic setting where I'm looking at overtraining. Resting heart rate in the morning can, kind of predict overtraining. But I will look at it just to see where the resting heart rate is at rest to see if it's elevated or not. But beyond that, I can't say I use it. I mean, there's equations like the heart rate reserve formula I might use it for, but it is something I do measure as a baseline measure in an intake with a new patient. I want to know, just like baseline resting blood pressure. It's good to know versus not know.
Right. I'm always interested to ask professionals like yourself that question because I've always viewed it as, right, well, if I make sure I get my cardio in there and keep that heart rate, at a reasonable number. I've been very blessed over the years. Sometimes, it's usually in the 40s.
Nice.
And
Nice.
so I always kind of looked at that's less wear and tear, right?
Yeah, your heart's just working that much easier on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. So, but I'm always interested in that feedback and so forth. So, okay. So I want to tap in because my experience of working with the professional truck drivers early on, I still am. I mean, a fitness advocate for them to get them to do some movement and walk or something. But I learned that after a very short time, what I really had to help them with is what they put in their mouth, right? because they don't get any education, Joshua. They only, they're two things. They're big sports advocate and also NASCAR advocates. So, they pay attention to sports and they see all those people pounding the power drinks, right? And the high sugar drinks. And I explained to them, I really sincerely do consider them the true road athletes and what they do, right? Because everything we have around us, the truck brought it to us, but they're not running up and down a football field or a basketball court. They're not burning that kind of energy. And when I do see them, and because before the pandemic, I was able to make a lot of visits, and it tapered off at the truck stops. I'd be there quite a bit. And so some of the drivers that fortunately would recognize me, and I'd see them standing there and go, "Hey, Bob, yeah, look, I'm doing good. I got some orange juice and I got some bananas." And I said, "Well, gosh, I'm very proud of you, but that's a lot of sugar." And they, "What do you mean?" And they don't know that in one of those containers of juice, right, that it's 2 and 3 servings and the sugar that's in there, and not understanding that. So that's why I'm always interested to talk to professional nutritionists like yourself, Joshua, that can talk a little bit about that. And I also read where there's new food pyramid out, and I didn't know if you had a chance to look at that. And I just want to kind of I want to talk about that on some of my podcasts to get your opinion about that. Is that a good thing, a bad thing, or do you have an opinion?
No, that's you asked one of the right people. I just did an article for my my local publisher. I'm a food and drink editor, or food and drink writer. So I submitted to my editor, and it's called "Don't Tell Me What to Eat," and it's just my take on the new dietary guidelines that came out 2 weeks ago. And there are many good parts to that. So I'll kind of tackle your second question first, but I think they did pretty well on several parts, and most Americans would do better to still follow the new updated guidelines than they would the SAD diet, the standard American diet. Almost anything is better than the standard American diet. It's literally given an acronym, SAD, because it is. But the new guidelines, they teased out some good points. Ultra processed foods must be reduced or minimized. Still keeping saturated fat at 10%, more whole grains, less, refined carbohydrates, more of a focus on good quality proteins. I think they could have teased that out a little bit more, what a good quality protein is. But they did, give that a little bit more priority, which I thought it needed. More fruits, more vegetables. They even gave some focus on gut health by trying to get fermented foods, now that the research clearly supports that. Hydration, getting variety and balance. It's more the same than different. The biggest areas I did see different, and there's other professionals, dietitians, researchers that are kind of like, wait, what? The call that whole fat dairy should be consumed, beef tallow should be consumed. The old research that low fat and no fat still stands. It's not like that went away. And there isn't really good substantive epidemiological or randomized controlled trials to show that full fat dairy is going to be any better. If people don't consider the fact that the full fat versions have almost twice as many calories as the low fat and no fat versions, it could get some people into trouble, especially with obesity, overweight, cholesterol, high triglycerides. They don't need to be eating more of those. I'm not saying by any means I'm a born and raised Wisconsinite and I love my dairy. But I also want people to be aware that even though the guidelines say, hey, go for the full fat versions now, it's not free reign. This is healthy. You have as much as you want. You still need to be under calorie control, or weight management becomes very difficult, and some of those biomarkers start to go unfavorable. So overall, the dietary guidelines, the update is good, with some caution to some new stances they took with things like the dairy. And, beef tallow. I don't know why that needs to be. It's no better for you than butter is, in my opinion. But it is what it is. But the key is, it is a guideline. It is not a requirement or a prescription for how to eat. Registered dietitians exist for the sole purpose of helping people find out what is best for them as an individual. So I'll kind of leave it at that.
So you touched on something. I wanted to circle back up, make sure I wanted to get your opinion. You mentioned that they could have fleshed out, I think, or I can't remember the word used, about the protein, the good source of protein. So can you circle back to that, Joshua, and tell us what you think is a good source?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I might as well, explain what that is. So lean cuts of beef, which there are currently 38 cuts of beef put out by the Beef Education Board that are considered lean, meaning that they are at least, what is it? I believe 10 grams of fat or less per serving. So if you're getting those, beef is perfectly acceptable. Others are much higher in fat, so you have to be careful on the cut. Lean grilled chicken, turkey, most cuts of fish, like things like salmon, mackerel, what's the other one? Trout. Those are a little higher in fat, but it's the good fats. Greek yogurt, eggs, egg whites, especially for truckers. One of my favorite on-the-go foods is beef jerky. Just watch the salt content because some can be quite high. 2 to 3 servings can put you over your daily limit. So just be careful with that. Protein bars, whey protein shakes when need be. All of the above are fair options for good sources of protein versus fried chicken is not the same as grilled chicken. The ribeye is not the same as the top sirloin. The egg omelet with 3 to 4 ounces of oozing out cheese is not the same as an egg white omelet with vegetables. So there is a difference, and if these things are being done daily or even weekly, you can end up putting yourself into trouble, or you can drive yourself towards better health when it comes to protein.
Yeah, thank you. That's some good information, and I try to explain to the drivers. One of the things I work on very hard with them is one of the first things I bring up into discussions when I'm giving lectures is to really help them get in the habit of packing their food, right?
Yes.
Most of the trucks now have refrigerators. Don't rely on getting, because I always say that when you're the life and the day of a professional driver, you're going to get stuck. Could be weather, could be construction, could be breakdown. And when you don't have a good choice to reach for, you make a bad one, right? Power
it's
drink.
Really interesting for truck drivers because one of the biggest things with nutrition I find that's been helpful, and dietitians echo this, is help the individual control their environment, their kitchen, their home, their office, because that's where they do most of their eating. That's where they have habits, good or bad. Well, the environment of a truck driver often ends up being the cab. And if they have crap around there, they're going to eat crap. If they don't, then they probably won't. So I found that, keeping the right things around the cab that they have, as a go-to when they get hungry, that's what they're going to eat. Make the easy choice, the simple, convenient choice. Sadly, that usually ends up being gas station truck stop food or something that's, super highly processed, or the energy drink. And on top of that, it tastes good. So it's hard to tell them don't do that. They're like, you're telling me not to do this. It's easy, it's convenient, and it tastes good. Come on. And then they get defensive. So this comes back to meeting them where they're at and making tiny adjustments first.
In early studies I did in the beginning, survey and talking to drivers about their daily caloric intake foods they took in. At that time, the average driver was somewhere around 4,000 to 4,500 calories a day. 50% of those typically were coming from drinks, right?
Wow.
So a lot of wasted calories, sugar, and so forth. So that's why, my philosophy came from asking them, because I realized it's a tough job being a truck driver in the cab alone all day. Give me 50%, meaning 50% of the time make a good choice and not a bad one, because their caloric intake was so high, Joshua, during the week. I used to always joke about I could give them a Flintstone vitamin. It'd probably make a difference for them. But
it probably would. They'd be getting more of the vitamins and minerals they needed that they weren't getting.
When you're taking in that many calories a day, it's not hard to shave off 5,000 or 6,000 in a week. And if I could do that, they're going to see a few pounds drop. And then my goal was to get them to 10 pounds. 10 pounds was my magic number. If I get them to 10, then they're going to notice, their blood pressure could drop 1 or 2 points. Their heart rate could go down. Obviously, they lost 10 pounds, start to feel accomplishment. And then I say, oh gosh, if I did that, let me do 10 more.
Yep.
Right. And then you start losing 10, 30, 40 pounds for those.
Get that snowball of momentum going.
Yeah. And all of a sudden they're going, well, I can accomplish this. And then pretty soon you're at the point they look in the mirror and they can see a physical difference and they get bought in. Right. So It makes a difference. So it really does.
Yeah. Sustaining it is easier than getting there. That's for sure.
Yeah. And it's can be very difficult. So in your new job that you're doing, so one of the questions I wanted to ask you too, that I talked quite a bit about, drivers, this is a mobile population, right? Unlike there are a lot that you worked with, regional, maybe get home nightly, but most of them are on the road for at least a week at a time.
Yep.
So your thoughts on how you service this mobile population?
Yeah. And, again, I was with the limited exposure I have the truck drivers, but the more I've looked into it and what I've heard secondhand and other professionals I know that do work with them, physical therapists, dietitians, mobility and stretch specialists, I think any movement is better than none. And I even think just like an exercise prescription I give for an athlete or any other patient, even in my musculoskeletal care now, we've got, exercise videos and demos that we build for them, send them videos of. I do them recording myself and send them to them to do wherever it might be, the gym, at home. I think giving them routines they can do that are simple. They can do them at home. They could do them at a truck stop. They could heck even do it within the truck. Bands, suspension trainers, anything that gets them moving a little bit more over time is a good thing. Because if they're just going day to day with no movement other than that, just sitting at that 90 degrees, you're going to get the tight hip flexors, you're going to get the rounded back, your neck is going to start to bother you. No human being that's bipedal, meant to evolve and walk, should be sitting, 8, 9, 10 hours a day. But that's the reality truth of a truck driver. So breaking that up with any movement, simple individualized prescription that they could follow using bands, TRX, a medicine ball, a kettlebell, that's going to go a long way, because the littlest thing they can do every day will have the biggest return on investment for them. It's not about, making this evolutionary strength training routine that they need to go to a gym for, even though it might be effective. I'm going to be as simple as possible. Can you do this 15 minutes a day, every day? And that'll probably have a strong ROI for them.
That's good information. Well, I want to also tell listeners that, if they want, they should go, just Google the new food pyramid, and they can look at that and they can see some of the things that you pointed out, which I think were very, very valid. And we're also going to, at the end of our podcast, we'll put up the link, send that over to Kayla that you put in there. Please. About your YouTube channel and information there, because that, once again, is something that drivers can see when they're out there on the road, right? They can pull that up and check that out. So, well, Joshua, thank you so much. I appreciate you being on here with us. And I also had said early on, I wanted to make the announcement while we're on the air here, that I'm very pleased that 10th Street has agreed to continue their sponsorship for the Fit Drivers podcast through the 26th season. And also, they're also been my sponsor for the last 4 years, I think. I do the Keep Pushing 22 for 22 veteran suicide push-up challenge every November, from November 1st to the 22nd. They've been doing that. So now that we're new fitness buddies, I'll be tagging you up, my friend, come November 1, and have you get out there and do some for us and post them up, and anybody you can rally up for support.
I'd be happy to. Absolutely.
Very kind. We've had success every year, and really have raised some money. It's about raising a few dollars for these organizations, because so many of the veterans, like I said, 10% of them are professional truck drivers. They have a lot of windshield time out there, right? And things come up all of a sudden that take them back in the day, and I want them to be able to pick up the phone and talk to somebody. So
I like that. Fully support it. Happy to help.
All right, my good friend. Thank you so much. And we'll get this edited out. Make sure you get a copy of it. We'll get it posted here before the end of the month. We're set.
Fantastic. I appreciate it. Truly do.
Appreciate you, man.